At St. George Antiochian Cathedral in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. In 2011, following a varied teaching career in which she taught bilingual kindergarten, Spanish reading, first grade, and Suzuki piano, she began studying iconography and Byzantine chant. Amy has been guided in her study of Byzantine chant by Dr. Stephen Esper, Richard Barrett, Samuel Aram, and Dr. Nicholas Gerohakis. Amy studies voice with countertenor Andre Nemzer and chants with the Byzantine choir of the Greek Orthodox metropolis of Pittsburgh. During her 7 years of study, she has been developing and testing Byzantine Beginnings, a curriculum to teach Byzantine chant. Byzantine Beginnings blends the best practices from other fields of education with the theory and praxis of Byzantine chant by using visual and concrete models, cooperative games, and ear training exercises. She loves teaching people who have struggled to learn chant through other methods. Amy has a performer's certificate in Byzantine music from Holy Cross Greek Orthodox School of Theology and is a member of the board of the St. John of Damascus Society, a nonprofit with the mission of supporting public outreach and education through excellence in Orthodox sacred music. Please welcome Amy forward.
Thank you. So here you can see pictured most of the materials that I use, and I've been actively developing and testing these out for about 6 years, and some of them I don't use very much, some of them I use a lot. So today we're going to go through the materials and the methods a little bit, and I'm going to teach you some basics about Byzantine chant. So one of my big inspirations, along with teaching reading in general as a public school teacher and Suzuki piano, is the Montessori method. In the Montessori method, they use concrete things to teach abstract. So there's a lot of great math materials and reading. I showed some of the readings here because we'll see that pop up later. The biggest inspiration comes from music mind games. Has any of you ever heard of that? Okay. My daughter took piano lessons from Michiko Yurko, who's the developer, and she started when she was 3, and half of her piano lesson was actually Western music theory, using music mind games. And I was just amazed at how much my daughter picked up, and how quickly and how easily Western theory came through this system. And so as a Suzuki piano teacher, I took the week-long training to teach music mind games. And as I did that training, I thought, wow, this could really transfer into teaching Byzantine chant and Byzantine notation. So that's really when it started. And a lot of the materials started out as being direct translations, and a lot of the games come from music mind games. So really, the biggest thing that I'm doing is using kinesthetic, visual, and auditory modes of learning and then making connections to what we're hearing in the music. And this helps by coming at this in different ways. You're activating different parts of your brain, and that's helping with memory. And then the games, they make repetition fun, and they allow us to isolate skills. So we can work on one thing with one material, and then we can put it together. And it also allows for differentiated instruction. We can make games easier by adding more symbols or less symbols or changing the parameter of the game. So when I started teaching, I mainly taught children because that's about all I could. That's what I felt comfortable with, basically. I didn't have enough materials for adults because adults fly through things. I've taught groups of about 15 to 20 adults, and adults do really well with differentiating themselves. Once I teach something, usually it's like a 5-minute mini lesson, and then they work on learning that themselves in a small group. And the small groups can take it hard. They can make it harder, or they can make it easier. So as I was trying to figure out what do we teach, what do I need to teach, I was really doing this for myself first of all, because I was struggling to learn. And so one thing that reading researchers found was that they could examine what strategies good readers use And then if they teach struggling readers those strategies, then they will become better readers. So what I did was I really observed closely the really good chanters that I knew, and I tried to figure out what skills they had that I needed to attain. And so I kind of made this little visual of those skills. So the basis is pedagogy, and that is the Greek equivalent of solfege. So in order to talk about the music and understand what you're hearing, you have to have this basic language. You know, if you don't know what the scale degrees are called, then you're just absolutely lost. So that's the base. And then the second thing, and I tend to pair these together, that's ear training and modal theory. So in Byzantine chant, there are 8 modes, and they have different bases. Some move in patterns of 4 pitches, some move in patterns of 3 pitches. So you coming, not having, if you haven't heard it, it's very hard for you to understand what you're hearing. So you have to pair modal theory and understanding of what's happening along with ear training. If I went through and I explained all the modes to you, but you couldn't really hear the differences, then you're not going to remember that as well. So those two really need to go together. And then symbol recognition, you know, you have to learn to read, and there's all different kinds of symbols. So those 3 things are kind of taught separately at once, and as you gain enough knowledge in each of those, you can put it together. And then once you have enough of that down, then you need to develop reading fluency. So, and then finally, interpretation. So in order to be able to add all those diddly-doos, or whatever John says, you have to have twiddly bits. You have to, you know, you have to have your ear trained. You have to know what's happening in the music. So let's go ahead and look at pedagogy. So I start with the Nipabu cards. These come straight from Music Mind Games. And let's say these together. The blue one, the D-H-E, that's actually the. Okay, so let's just say them. We're not going to chant them. Ready, go.
Nipabu gadi kezoni.
And back down.
Nizo keri gavu pani.
So along with that, I use the Greek letter cards. And that's because in the music, you will, instead of saying this English, these English syllables, you actually see the Greek letter. So the letter next to ni, the red ni, that is how it's written in music. And you can see the pi, that's pa, etc. Okay? And then we play some games. So I actually, when I teach the Greek letters, I use the game Fat Snake. And so we mix up all the Greek letter cards, and then I show the first letter, the ni, and then the students find the rest of the ni's and place them in a row, and then we do the pa. And each time we repeat the letters that we already have found. And so it provides lots of repetition and scaffolding. After that, we play another game called Snake, and this is a Music Mind Games game as well. They put the letters in order. In this picture, you can see they've actually skipped up a second, so they're doing every other letter. So once they know up 1, then we go to up 2. But I found that actually using the Greek letters too much isn't really necessary, because when you're reading notation, you're not reading the Greek letters a lot. It's really more of being able to chant on pedagogy and having that verbal skill of moving around in the scale. So I switched to the Nipabu cards. Here, this game is Scrabble, and you know how to play Scrabble. So as the pitches ascend, you could go up vertically, or as they ascend, you can go to the right horizontally. So instead of practicing the scale in order, you can go up from K, you can go down from Bu. It's practicing a different scale, just knowing going up or down from any one of the scale degrees. And then this is Spit. This is played in partners. You have 5 piles, and you play onto the center pile there. And in this case, you can go up or down from Bu. Okay, so you can also play where you go up 2 from Bu or down 2 from Bu. to make it harder. That's one way that you could differentiate instruction. So once people are able to move around on the scale, then we can start with modal theory and ear training. And this is a traditional theory model. So I put the little Greek letters there for you to see. But basically, the first 5 ladder-looking things, those are 5 scales, and they're showing an octave worth of the scale. So in Byzantine chant, we give the scale a value, or an octave a value of 72 moria. So 12, you can see on the lower left, there's a 12 there. I would like to point closer, but I can't, so. That is a whole step, and then the next one over there's a little 6, that's a half step. So basically, there's the Greek letters. On the right side of the ladder, those are telling you the pitch, and then the 12 is telling you the distance between each pitch. So this is like a timeline of pitch going up from, okay? And each of those lines represents a place where you stop, that is the pitch. So this is a very helpful chart, and I used it a lot, but I decided that I could try to make it better. Okay, so the issues with this chart, Byzantine chant is not, the octave is not really important. So the question occurs, what do you do when you go above this, what's pictured, and what do you do when you go below? And being a Western trained musician, I would have said, oh, you just take that octave and you move it up. But that's not what happens in many cases. So, so I created this. And these are actually cards. So, and you can kind of see the breaks between. So that red scale there, it's actually the red card, and then there's a white card, and a red card, and a white card, and a red card. And that scale, it moves, it repeats every 5 pitches. So it repeats at the pentachord. And the purple scale, that is 1, 2, 3, 4 pitches, so it shows a tetrachord, and that repeats at the tetrachord. The other thing that's confusing about this chart is that you have, in the first scale, the base is ni, the second scale, the base is pa, then ni, then zo, then zo, then ni. So it's not lining up. So with my materials, in this chart, the V is lined up. You can see that line going across. And so that helps us to see how the modes relate to each other. The other issue is that in this scale chart, we have the natural diatonic scale, but it appears, it sounds very different in the different modes that it's in. And so I wanted to create a model that more accurately reflected what we hear. So in this chart, you see that there's lots of different blue cards. And all of those blue cards are the different tetrachords or pentachords that are used in the diatonic modes. And I don't know if anyone's talked about attractions yet. I think we have. So we have stable notes and then pitches that are attracted to them. And so on these cards, the pitches that are affected by attractions, those have like a fuzzy line. And some of them will have a little symbol pointing, telling you which way it's attracted. So, and then at the bottom, I have these other cards, and these are devices to help people who don't know music, who don't know what a perfect fourth is, a perfect fifth. We have Here Comes the Bride, and then Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And so this works with children very well. And then the other one, I like to use this example. This is Jaws. So the issue we use the Western system. We took that and put it into Byzantine chant. But we have all of these modes. And so pa sounds different in each of the modes. because of the intervallic environment around it. And V sounds different. So in this mode chart, you can see underneath the Greek letter, there's some kind of squiggle. And that squiggle, you know, in the ladder section, there's all the Greek letters with the squiggle. That squiggle is telling you which mode you should be in, or what the intervallic environment is around that particular pitch. So in order to kind of cement that in your mind, we can do the Jaws theme on Pavu. Okay, ready? So it goes Pavu, 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 So you see on this is an enlarged picture of the tetrachord for the second mode and plagal second. You can see under that paw, that squiggle is telling us that's the interval around, the one that we just did. So these cards, I do a lot of games with these cards, ear training games, you know, where I do something, students copy. They can be used at more advanced level when students are reading hymns. You can use the cards to show mode changes because, you know, when you're just saying symbols, it's not really so obvious that you're changing pitches. And I'll show you a little more about that. But along with the tetrachord cards, modal theory, we work on ear training. So I've been developing some audio recordings that I call Playing with Pedagogy, and they're based on some second language learning audio recordings. I use Pimsleur and Greek by Radio. And they go through, they do a lot of Pedagogy, and it's the model, vocal model, then the student, and then the vocal model again. I know when I was first learning, I would always say, can you please chant the scale? Can you please chant the scale to the teacher? And I hear other students ask that too. And, you know, we wanted the teacher to go from the knee to the knee. And it took a long time for me to understand that it doesn't happen in the music, so the teacher's not going to do that. So in these Playing with Pedagogy recordings, we work on learning the tetrachord, learning the trichord, you know, learning these intervals on Pedagogy, and then starting to develop the ability to hear these pitches with text, okay? Because the goal of ear training and the goal of Pedagogy is to when you're chanting, you know, text, to be aware of where you are in the scale. And so those recordings work on the student with that, and also on vocal production, on getting the pitches right, okay? So a lot of these pitches are not in the Western scale, and so it helps people to have this model to hear, to try it, and then to check what they did against the model again. So then along with those audio recordings, then we play games with the Nipavu cards using pitch now. And then I also started working on something more kinesthetic. In music mind games, she uses the Kerwin hand signs. And so I started out using those, and my students found them helpful. But the Kerwin hand signs reflect Western music. You know, it's Western theory. And we don't use Byzantine theory is very different. So I started trying to figure out what could I do. Since melodies move in tetrachordal patterns, trichordal, or pentachordal patterns, I decided I needed to find something that could help us with that, because we're using the Greek Pedagogy system, you know, goes knee to knee, but the modes do not go knee to knee. So when you're thinking about the structural pitches of a mode, knee is not the base. Sometimes it is, but other times it's a different pitch. And so if we can have something physical that will help us to remember these different modes and variations, then I think that's helpful. So I came up with a tetraphone. So if you put your hands like this, like you're going to play the saxophone, then you can use your fingers. So on the left side, we have the first mode. Go ahead and put your hands up like this. And we'll do the first one. So I'll do it and then you do it. And then the second mode. So then I have this card that I can use with students, and we work on that. We sing Here Comes the Bride, we work on Pa-dee-dee-dee, Pa-dee-dee. And we play some different games with that. Then we go ahead and we start using the Nipabu cards. Now, we can't just use the Nipabu cards though. Why is that? Yeah, there's different scales. So we have to know which paw we're going to use. So it can't just strictly be ear training. We also have to introduce some symbol recognition. So we go ahead and stick in the, these are called martiriers. These Greek words too. So we go ahead and put those symbols in that tell us which scale we use. And if we were playing these with the cards, then we would have the cards spread out on the table, and we would pick them up and put them in order in the pile. So you're moving, you're thinking about, what's next. And as you do it, we would chant the sounds, or we would chant the words. So let's pretend like we just played this, like we're playing this game. Ready? And then we can change it. So these ear training things are really like the phonemic awareness part of learning to read. Before you can learn to read letters, you have to understand like the sound, that sounds and words are important. Beginning sounds, ending sounds. So this is kind of like pre-reading skills. So we can change it. We change these martiriers again, and then this tells us that we do it in the other mode. We're not going to do it because I don't have as much time as I'd hoped for. Ear training games, we have the Nipabu cards, the tetrachord cards, the tetraphone. And while we're working on all those skills, we also work on symbol recognition. So we've already worked on the Greek letters a little bit. We've already worked on the martiriers a little bit. Here is a hymn, which you've already seen some hymns, so this is familiar. But basically, we have lots of different types of symbols to learn. The interval symbols are the ones that are really the biggest thing that we need to learn. And then also the rhythm symbols. So the traditional method to teach the symbols, it's a manual of exercises, I don't know, around 100 or something like that. And they teach interval symbols, rhythm symbols, and qualitative symbols, which are symbols that tell us how to execute the note that we're singing. This is the first example. This is the first exercise in one of the books. And I think that you can read it with me. Let's look at the first symbol is the ison up at the top, and that's telling us to say the same. And then the second one is the oligon, and that's telling us to go up one. So we have to know which scale to know what up one sounds like. And then the third one is the apostrophos. Looks like an apostrophe, and that's telling us to go down one. So this is my friend Nick Jones. He took this from Greek and put it into English, and he put the parley in there for us. So let's read this together. Mi, mi, fa, fa, mu, la, la, mi, mi, ge, ge, so, so, mi, 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 so, so, ge, ge, di, di, da, la, mu, mu, pa, pa, ni, ni. So this exercise manual goes through teaching more and more symbols and using phrases that sound like piano exercises, like finger exercises. And many people are able to learn using this method, but other people, and I've observed a number of people who have trouble with this. So as a reading teacher, I thought, what is the problem with this? And the first thing is that the phrase is really long. So when you think about children learning to read, you don't give them long sentences to read. You give them, a C consonant, vowel, consonant word. The second thing is that it's a Western musical phrase. So, I talked about how important ear training is. For Western people who grew up in the West with Western music, they need the ear training. It's very, very important. And when we're starting out learning to read in an idiom that doesn't match what the music is, that's counter. It doesn't work very well. So, so those are really two of the big issues. Let's see. And then the other thing is that if we take away the nipabu, you know this scale, and what you end up doing is instead of focusing on the symbols, you're focusing on saying the part of the keywords right. Going up 2 and then down 1 and then up 3. And so your focus is more on, saying part of the key than reading. And in my method, we already focused on that. We separated those skills. In this method, we're combining them. And that means that it's going to be a slower learning process. Okay, so to teach simple recognition, I kind of go the Montessori route. And I have something called the interval cards and the Martiri's and Torres cards. And these have to be used together because that's how phrases work in the music. We have to know, we're going up or down, how many and in what mode. So let's go ahead and do this. When I start teaching students, we do 5 symbols in the first sequence, and we're going to do 3 today. So this is the Isan. We would have the cards on the table. You would find all the Isans. You'd say Isan, and then we would chant it. So can we chant this as is? We have to know what note we're starting on, okay? So we'll add in, we'll pick one. We're going to do the hard chromatic scale of the second mode, and we're going to start from Pa. So let's read it. Pa, 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 pa. Good. Let's read it in the first mode, diatonic scale. Ready? Pa, 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 pa. So it didn't really change, right? And that's because the pa is the same. We need the intervallic environment around the pa to actually hear a difference between these two. So let's go up. So those blue cards, blue like the sky, that's up 1. So you find all those cards, and then we would stick them, and you would stick them in the phrase, and we're going to go up 3. So we have to change the martiria at the end, and we'll stick those in, hopefully, yep. And so now, when you see that blue card, you're going to go up a pitch. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's look at that. We're going to do the first mode first, because those are martiris for the first mode, the blue card. So let's just do that scale so that we remember how it sounds. Okay, so it goes on and is fa, fa, hu, la, di, la, hu, fa. Okay, so now let's try and read this. Fa, fa, hu, la, di, di. Good. Now I have my students move the cards. See how it changes. Ready? Go. And now we'll go ahead and change modes, okay? So the reason I always teach 2 modes to start with is because changing modes is very important in Byzantine chant. If you spend, 3 months singing in one mode and then start singing in another mode, it's a skill that needs to be practiced from the very beginning. It's a concept of print type thing. If you start chanting in one mode and you do it for 3 to 6 months, people just ignore those martyrios, and they don't really understand the function. They understand the top part, but the bottom part tends to become lost on them. So I think it's really important to teach 2 modes, and so that people really understand how the print works. Okay, so let's review how this scale goes. This is the second mode, the red scale. And now let's read the phrase. And now we'll move on and let's read the new phrase. And now let's do down one. So the down cards are they have a little green border, and that's just to help us really to sort cards more than anything. And we've changed the martyrios, so this time we're going to start at the and go down to pa, so we're going to use 3 again. So if you were my student, you'd find all the cards and then we'd stick them in. And we're going to do the diatonic, so let's review how that should sound. We move on. Let's do it again. And now we'll change scales. So you would be moving all these cards, and that helps too. You'd be finding them. Ready? Let's review the scale. Ready? Go. And all of these exercises actually help with ear training because we're focusing the base of the tetrachord and the top of the tetrachord. And really, as a Western musician, you can find the octave really easy. It's just as important as a Byzantine chanter to have the top and the base of the tetrachord, or whatever the stable notes are really, to have those cemented in your head. So this helps with that. Once people understand how the system works, then they need to learn lots of symbols. So this is where the games come in again. We play Scrabble in the same way. So the long row at the top, you can see that's down 2, down 1, stay the same, up 1, up 2, up 3. And then, so you go, up and up. And then we can also play spit in the same way. So if there's a stay the same card, you can play an up 1 or a down 1 card. And this helps people get a lot faster. And it also helps, so like when you learn the first 5 symbols, you can master those. And you're like, yes, I know them. And then you introduce 2 or 3 more, and suddenly you don't know those first 5 symbols anymore. And it's because you get confused, because they look similar. So we play the same game and add in more symbols until that's mastered, add in some more, and then you've got them. The last game is called set, and that actually is, I use that with symbols that have similar meanings and similar functions, and they look similar. So it's kind of like the B and D in English. Some people get that confused. These people, I myself, I had trouble with it, so I made this game. It's a matching game so that you're matching the tricky symbol with the kind of more normal symbol that it goes with. And then the parallegicles, we play that with the Nipabu cards. Then we can play it with the interval cards. And one thing I didn't say, when you play these ear training games, you're always doing them in the context of a mode. So you pick the mode and you want to mimic what's happening melodically in that mode. So if we were to play this game, I would say, first mode, stay between Pa and B, and you would find the cards, you'd put them on top, and we'd sing the Parlagi. So let's just pretend like we're playing that game. So this is first mode, on and is already. Go. And then we would play the other mode. Okay, and then this game, we go ahead and change the parameters. So next, you can jump between Pa and B. You would know that card, the up 3 and the down 3. And then you can start moving in any direction within those notes. And then you can add pitches to the top or bottom. And then you play it in other modes, etc., etc. So these are the martirias and Torres cards. You already know the jaws thing, that's the martiria, or the martiria. And then the little symbols down at the bottom left, those square ones, those are the Torres. And those are found within the hymn, and they tell us to change modes within the hymn. So this on the right, you can see this is like I had a hymn, and I'm modeling with the tetrachord cards and the Torres cards what's happening in the hymn, all these different modal changes. And what I find, this is a good way to practice this skill, because if you have to read, if you need to practice this skill and you just look at hymns, it takes a long time to read enough hymns to get enough practice on switching modes. So this is a way to practice the skill of switching modes using games and concrete visual things. So then once people know enough symbols, then we go ahead and start working on theses, which Sam talked about. And I have some cards that I just started testing out about 6 months ago, and these are the yellow theses. These are similar to those cards you saw on the Montessori page, the little pink cards. And these are like the basic words of Byzantine chant. So really, you can't just read symbol by symbol. You have to begin chunking words together, or chunking symbols together, and reading ahead. And so these phrases help with that. That's what we're working on. And they're kind of like the first step before we get into reading hymns. And I was going to do this, but I don't have time, so sorry. But basically, we're again using both modes. And this is more ear training, because this game would have been name that phrase. So I would chant it, and then you would need to figure out which mode it is in, and then which one it is, and you would chant it with me. We would read it, and then also you can use on the right side. You can see all the different cards then can be used together to do dictation, and this can be done in small groups, which is nice because. You know, if you have people writing individual on papers, you know, they're looking at their neighbor, and you know, it's nice to be able to do things together to have the support of other people. Okay, so then the last big thing that I have worked on is a way to teach rhythm and meter. So meter and rhythm function differently in Byzantine chant than in Western music. In Western music, we have the time signature, and we have bar lines telling us where the downbeat is. In Byzantine music, we have no bar lines. The hymn pictured is in duple meter, so 2. And as a chanter, you really have to develop the ability to know where the downbeat is when you're chanting. So teachers will tell their students every time you practice, you have to do down 1, 2, 1, 2. And you have to do this to develop this sense of where the downbeat is. And so when I'm thinking about teaching counting, I wanted a system of counting that would help emphasize this. There's lots of counting systems out there. So I tried, as many as I could find. So we have 1, 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and ta ta ti ti ta ti 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 blue blue jello jello jello. None of those really help us know where the downbeat is, unless we just do something special with our voices. So I developed a new counting system. I'm still testing it out, but my students that have used it have found it to be very helpful. And basically, this is to be used with hymns in duple meter. So each of these yellow cards is 2 beats, and the downbeat has a harder consonant sound, the t or the d, and then the upbeat has a softer sound, the l. So just by the language, you're bringing out the downbeat more. So let's read the Tala card and then the Western way below, so that you can kind of see what these new rhythms are representing. So it's Tala, 1, 2. Ta-lio, 1, 2, and viola, 1 and 2, violio, 1 and 2, and ta, 1, 2, tri-la-la. Okay, so if you were to read a phrase in Byzantine music, that's what I've got down below. See if you can feel where the downbeat is as we're reading. Ready? Go. Ta-la, ta-la, violio, ta-la, ta-la, viola, viola, ta-la, ta. Do you feel where the downbeat is? That was my goal in creating this. The other reason that I wanted to use words, not blue jello or hamburger hot dog, because this is Celtic music, I wanted to use words because in Byzantine notation, each interval symbol, so on this first card, each of those gets 1 beat. The interval symbol inherently gets 1 beat, except for 2 symbols. Those are exceptions. Of course, we always have exceptions. But rhythm symbols are additional symbols, and they add beats or they take away partial beats. So they work in the same way that interval symbols, where you're adding pitches or subtracting pitches, but in this case, you're adding beats or subtracting beats. And so, what we have here, these are all tala. Same rhythm, but they look very differently. So it's kind of hard to know where the downbeat is, except for orthography rules, which I also teach, because that can help people to know where the downbeat is. So we use these cards. Let's go back. So we use these cards and practice with tapping, ta-la, ta-la, and then I start to introduce the other types of rhythms. So that second card there, that the third symbol, the thing above it, that's a gorgon, and that's telling us to take a half beat away from the pitch it's above and a half beat from the one before. And so this is called ta-lio. Okay, and so we would read this whole phrase with the ta-lio in it. The other purpose of these cards is to teach people to chunk symbols and to read ahead. Because in Byzantine notation, you saw that this symbol, it affects the one it's above and the one before it. So if you're only reading the symbol that you're on, you're going to make mistakes. You cannot read Byzantine notation, one symbol at a time. You have to read ahead, both melodically because there are mode changes and you have to know if you're switching modes, but also because of rhythm. So these cards, when I introduced the new card with the new type of rhythm combo, I always have some space where there's a tala in the middle. And that teaches people, you just kind of look at the tala quickly and go to the next thing. And so it's teaching them, it's practicing chunking and reading ahead. And then once they're really good at reading the rhythms, we go ahead and stick them all together, all of these different rhythms, so that they can practice getting more fluent at that. So this is a chart that shows all of these different combinations. And I went through earmologic music, And this is really all I could find. So, I thought there would be tons and tons and tons of things that were different. But in terms of like the diola and the trialala, those are the ones that you see in music. So the thing to notice about the diola is that it can look very different. It's not just the interval symbols that are different. The way the rhythm symbols themselves are being used look different. And it has to do with where the accented syllable is in the word or in this rhythmic progression. So it's helpful for people to have a word to categorize these things that all look so different. And then there is one exception. So you can see over here on the right side, that's a tala card. This is the one exception in that the first symbol there, it affects the symbols in the measure before. Okay, so that's why there's no yellow bar there, because that first card is no longer tala. But when we put them together, it changes to ta-leo. And that's just showing you how you have to read ahead. So all of the symbols on the left side, those are actually all within a 2-beat measure. But this is the one over here on the right that's affecting the measure before. And once you get to harder music, then you see a lot more of this type of thing, where symbols from the future are affecting symbols from before, meter-wise. And that's one of the hard things about reading Byzantine notation. When you have a long string of rhythms, people tend to lose the downbeat. They tend to speed through them. And that's another reason why I developed this system, was because I wanted, the downbeat is so important. So the last thing is interpretation, and that's the capstone. But I haven't developed any materials for that yet. And basically that's because teachers teach, you learn interpretation from your teacher. And so it comes, through learning hymns and mimicking what your teacher is doing. I imagine at some point I will probably create some materials for that, but I just haven't got that far. It's Byzantine beginning. So I'm really focusing on these foundational skills that allow for the higher level stuff. So I believe that's all.